in for our episode on meal plans and flexible dieting.
Flexi dieting. IIFYM.
I remember when I actually first saw those letters and I thought, what the hell is that? And I'm sitting there thinking, what is that? And then obviously there was a massive surge, wasn't there, for a couple of years?
Yeah, it went proper. It was like a proper trend. Like if you were doing the IIFYM diet, you were super cool. And for those listeners who maybe still don't know what we're talking about, it fits your macros. It's the acronym for that. So this is really kind of, I guess, the promotion. How would I say it? It's a popular weight loss program that's based on a sensible theory. I think that's probably a good way of describing it. There's no bad foods, and it allows you to choose any food as long as it fits within your macros and you get a good balance of overall macronutrient needs. That's kind of...
Yeah, because I think that the negative to it was that people suddenly thought, well, if it fits within my calories, that I can eat pretty much whatever I want and diet. And then in theory, it's true. You could diet on pizza if you wanted to. But then what I try and say to anyone that I work with that asks about it is that things like satiety, hunger, training being fueled, all of those things aren't going to then be, catered for if you're dieting on pizza and food that's processed, etc., etc. So you can if you want to, but you're probably not going to feel very good.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think when it hit popularity, it's always been around, but I think when it kind of rose to popularity a couple of years back, it was kind of due to how adaptable it was. It kind of helped everybody, not just like the fitness enthusiast, but it was also really good for, maybe a working mum who was really busy, or, the person who's going to work every day and needs to choose things that suit the plan, and it allowed people to include, like you say, a good balance stuff with their favorite foods as well. So for example, you could have a clean week of macronutrient intake and then a weekend treat, still falling within that macronutrient intake, so people don't technically fall off on a weekend and then have to restart all again. So there's a lot of really good, I think, premise behind the flexible dieting, and whether you want to call it IIFYM or macro dieting, or I don't know, flexi dieting, they all kind of loosely follow the same idea, don't they?
Yeah, and I think that it's really good for people as well I found for myself, because I've always flexible dieted through my whole bodybuilding journey, that I have actually learned loads about nutrition because I was really keen to learn. It facilitated that. I would sit for hours oh, so that's got that much protein, that's got that. Oh, if I put that with that, that will hit a meal macronutrient goal. And then I started to evolve as to, my meals over the day. I could hit a certain amount of carbs, protein, and fat each time I eat, depending on what time I train and things like that. Depending on, it really does depend on the person, because some people would prefer, I want a meal plan because I don't want to think about it. And they're not that interested in nutrition. So it would then not lend itself very well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I tend to find that, if I take sort of a few of my clients as a case study, more of my transformation or lifestyle clients, we tend to sort of almost work off a meal plan to begin with until they have the confidence that they can see, almost a bit like what you're saying, Sarah, that this amount of food equates to this amount of calories equating to this amount of macronutrients. And then they suddenly go, oh, with this amount of, proteins, carbs, and fats of clean foods, I can get away with eating a hell of a lot more. And then they start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and realize that they can eat a lot more, feel a lot more satiated, and enjoy their food, and slowly amalgamate into, okay, I've enjoyed the meal plans for, say, the first 3 to 4 months, and I'll give a variety of, say, across the week. I might give 10 meal plans for them to jump between different things. But then it's a case of switching over to the macronutrients and breaking it down and getting them used to tracking and how you track. And that's a whole other piece as well, isn't it, that you have to be quite confident in.
Yeah, because I remember you've said before about yourself, in your, particularly in off season, and same as me, if you're having a flexi approach, you've said before that you can look and go, okay, so that's about that much protein, that much fat, that much carbs. And it does become automatic when you've been doing it as long as we have. it's so much easier to just eyeball stuff. But it is definitely, like you say, a confidence thing. Like I remember, when you first start tracking, it's like, oh my God, it's a whole new world, and it's very daunting at first.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose it depends on like the goal that your outcome. If your goal is, because you can use this approach to weight gain, weight loss, maintenance, you can use it for all sorts, and it's finding, I think where people get worried, and this is obviously where a coach comes in to help you, but is the calculating your daily needs in terms of what that macronutrient breakdown should look like for your particular goal. And if you're somebody doing this yourself, it's working out the amount of calories that you burn almost like at resting heart rate, like where you are sort of right now, and then the calories expended during exercise and all the other activities that you might do during that time. And it's then finding out what that sort of entire amount looks like and how much you have to consume to enable you to either lose, gain, or maintain. And that's sort of where it's at. And it can be a little bit of a game, but oh my gosh, I mean, if you just type into Google right now, how to work out my base rate calories, there's 100 different calculators, different ways you can do it. But yeah, calculating the total daily energy expenditure will give the dieter, I guess, an idea of how many calories they burn in any given day, and then adding the food on top of that.
I think you raise a good point there, actually. A lot of people that I work with that flexible dieted before, just on their own, based on, like you said, going online and doing like a calculator or whatever. Yeah. We've all done that. Yeah. And MyFitnessPal, which is what I use, I know there's some other ones as well, it offers you to add your daily exercise. And I don't know about you, but when I work with people with flexible dieting, I do the questionnaire and I do all the things that you just described, asking what they do. I then equate that and work out what calories, macros they need to facilitate their goal. And then I don't get them to add their own exercise, because some of it, I mean, on MyFitnessPal, you can put in an hour's worth of weight training. It says like 600 calories. And it's like, no, it's definitely not.
Yeah, you're not right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess some people might burn that, but as an example, it really does over-egg what you do within your sessions. And then if you're adding that on to what you're eating, a lot of people can be caught short on that.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. It's like, these things are a guide, they're not gospel. So you can't just take that, like you say, 600 calories in a 45-minute weight session. Nah,
it ain't, no.
Not happening, unless you're doing some crazy German volume training or something mental like that. But yeah, it's just a case of kind of working it out.
I find simplifying it as well is the biggest point to it, because if you start adding, everything, it can add to the complexity of something that can be pretty simple.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people can do too much research and almost try and figure out the perfect plan. And it's ultimately, and I know we've said this on previous podcasts, but it's ultimately, let's just take a weight loss goal. As long as what you're eating overall, and let's just forget the macro breakdown for a second, but as long as what you're eating overall is, less than your expenditure, then, you're going to have a reasonably good outcome.
Yeah.
Then the next level of that cake is, okay, well, whatever that calorie intake is, how do we break that down into good carbs, fats, and proteins?
Yeah.
And this is the bit that, let's forget for a second that maybe we all have a little bit of knowledge about food. Yeah. The first thing people do is cut out carbohydrates, don't they? The first thing they do is like, oh my God, carbs are bad. That's where all my weight's going to go on if I eat carbs. Problem is with that is if we take carbohydrates out of that macronutrient breakdown and we make those the smallest portion of that cake there, you're going to find that, yeah, you might lose a lot of weight quite quickly. A lot of that will be water, glycogen, muscle, etc. But you're teaching your body then that you're lacking in one of its major macros that it needs to sustain energy performance, driving obviously your training and doing all the other stuff like cognitive thinking and everything else. And then if you go like that for too long, not eating carbs, the second you put them back in, body just goes, what's this? And you'll find that weight just jumps back on very quickly.
And obviously, I mean, that describes what we do when we carb up for a show, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%.
You go down and down and down in a prep, and then you have those 3-4 days, depending on, you know, what you're doing with your carb up, and then it's like, whoa, you know, the muscles are like, and it's amazing, isn't it? Because you forget how you're thinking, oh, I'm going to have double, triple the amount of carbohydrates when you carb up, and it's like the body literally just eats it all up, and it's like, have I even eaten 400 grams of carbs today?
Exactly. I mean, it is absolutely that in a microcosm, if you want to take that kind of example there. But it's not being afraid to divvy up your plan with a really good proportion of carbs and proteins and fats. And, you know, I think what is it, 60-60-40 is the kind of general golden rule of the thumb, where you have your cake and
like the pie chart thingy on there.
Chart, yeah, it is majority protein and carbs, and then you have the smaller portion for your fats, obviously. Just as a good rule of the thumb, that's where you should be kind of starting. So typically, I guess 45 to 50% of your calories, or probably more than that actually, 45 to 65% of your calories might be carbs, 10 to 35% protein, and 20 to 30% fat, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think sometimes the general pop stuff, like when you go onto MyFitnessPal and just put the settings in, the protein is always a lot lower than I personally recommend for a lot of people, especially with body composition changes.
Yeah, 100%. And that's not something else as well, is that you've got, like in everything, you've got the extremes. I tend to find that when a lot of people come on board with me, their protein is astronomical. It's like on another level. You know, sometimes I've got people coming in and they're sitting on like 3 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that is a lot. That is a lot.
See, I get the other end. That's because you work with bodybuilders.
I work with bodybuilders, and they all think like, let's eat all the protein. Problem is, eat too much protein, your digestive system's like, oh, what's going on here?
Wow, that is a lot. Yeah, because obviously you get the I think the average is like a 1.1 to 1.4 or something.
Yeah, I say a good rule of thumb is, well, for my populations, I work with people who are muscle building, and obviously it depends on your weight and everything else, but 1.4 to 1.5 is a good baseline. And then depending on where you're at and how much your body responds, you can play around with that protein intake. But you don't need excessive amounts of protein to grow. It only puts a lot of stress on the digestive system to process that protein. Body will just excrete what it doesn't need. So you're putting your body under a lot of stress to actually break it down. So there is a bit of science involved in that. You can't just eat loads of protein and hope you're going to like beef up.
Because I get the other end of the spectrum. I get, especially females that are, I don't know if scared is the right word, but worried about if they eat too much protein, they're going to gain muscle.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. It's like, it's the sort of feeling like, it's almost the same thing as if I push really heavy on the weights, I'm going to get big, giant, jacked muscles. And it's just not the case, is it?
Oh, we wish.
Yeah, I wish.
I say to people, like, I've been eating minimum of 160 grams of protein pretty much every day for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't say I'm carrying that much muscle to worry about me feeling bulky and muscular. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of females, I don't know about who you work with and whatever, 160 to 170 is fairly high for sort of where I'm at. So they're not even, you know, anywhere near that a lot of the time. And it's really that education to get behind that. And it is difficult with things like MyFitnessPal and going online, because, you know, a lot of them, it calculates that they should have 60 to 80 grams a day, which is, you know, so that's 2 meals for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a little amount. Yeah, overall. I mean, like you say, it's interesting because when you've got one extreme to the other, and you have the client who is maybe more so your clients there, who wants to maybe lose some weight or tone up or start to increase their muscle size to help them with controlling their weight gain in terms of their fat distribution and things like that. And they're learning the basics about healthy nutrition and habits around food and behaviors around food, and putting that plan together. And then you've got like people like I'm working with, like I know I've mentioned this person on the podcast before, but one of my clients, Zoe, who's a natural bodybuilder, she's been bodybuilding for the last, 6 years now it'll be coming on, or just under that certainly. And then she has been progressively, pushing her physique and her frame to try and grow as much natural tissue as possible, learning how to do that by eating performance-based diets. And I'm just like playing around on my laptop here to give you an example of what somebody like Zoe is on, to give you just sort of a breakdown of her macros. So
she does her photos, doesn't she, on Instagram stories?
Yeah, and anybody who wants to kind of see someone who tracks their food quite well and shows you how they make good, healthy recipes and everything, Zoe's a great person to follow, actually, because she does show a lot of really good stuff. So Zoe's, she's 27, her height is 1.6 meters. She's sort of sitting roughly just now post-stage around 62 kilos. When she initially started with me in the peak of her off-season, she was sitting at 65 kilos, or just there or thereabouts. So we're reversing her off the back of a stage diet, and we're sitting around that nice 62.2 there as of last week. And her diet, I've got it up here. Now we wanted to get her calories and her macros back up to being pretty optimal quite quickly, so that she could regain a bit of body fat to help her hormonal levels, to get everything back up and running. Her diet is made up of 2 days, a high day and a refeed day, to get herself back up there. And she's sitting on a high day of roughly around 2,283 calories. So it's a good amount.
Nice.
Which works out roughly as around 38 calories per kilo of body weight. And this is a really important point. You don't want your calories dipping at any point, no matter what the goal, below 25 calories per kilo of body weight. That's a really important point for female health. Because the second it starts to dip below 25, you're starting to go into that, what I would call crash course zone, where the body starts to say, okay, I'm actually not receiving generally an optimal level of calories for any of the functionings, whether it's gain or loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's there's so many things, especially in a prep at the tail end. The things like the hormonal changes, you wouldn't want to hang that out for too long, because you can be fucking with things, quite honestly. And to recover from a prep, it can take up to 6 months when you're getting to stage condition. And there's so much going on, isn't there? And if you're getting closer to, I guess, at 25, it's tricky territory, and that's where a coach comes in as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, across the board, I don't think I've actually ever got anybody to the stage with dipping below that number, ever. There's things you can manipulate around the diet to help you continue the fat loss phase that doesn't put the functions of your body at risk. So there is kind of a certain benchmark I wouldn't go below.
So would you look at adding more expenditure if in that example you got closer?
Yeah, exactly. Just more expenditure, or I'd start to maybe play with what I would call kind of the setup of the days. So to boost metabolic rate, I might start to play with carb cycling, that kind of thing. So you're keeping the body guessing by using different tools, but without putting it in ever a suppressed state. That's kind of the premise we always hold when we're looking at diets.
Yeah, I guess a slight tangent, but similar. I've seen a lot more people being prepped on higher fats and doing fat loading into peaking for a show, and haven't really looked at it much, but I've seen that's become a lot more common than it ever has.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I mean, I have to say, it's not necessarily a protocol I would use, because I've not seen enough. I've seen a lot of evidence to support sort of the carb depletion, carb loading, water manipulations.
It's always been that way, really, for bodybuilding, hasn't it? Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought this could be something that would be quite good to see how this pans out, because I feel like more and more coaches will get wind of it and maybe try it with clients, maybe themselves. But one of them I saw, I was just thinking, oh my God, like I can't even imagine having, I think it was like 180 grams of fat in a day. I was like, wow. I mean,
that would go right through me.
I mean, I guess you'd be having like steak, salmon, eggs, peanut butter, and it does, it will come up quite quickly. But it's just, that blows my mind, because I don't even think gone over like 80 on a tracking day. But even on an off-plan day, even going over like 100 would be mental, wouldn't
Oh
it?
God, yeah, I know. I mean, my fats get really low in my preps. I respond better high carbohydrate, high protein diets, but I suppose again it comes down to like if you had a high fat diet throughout the whole of your prep, maybe you were doing close to keto with an injection of carbs every, I don't know, fortnight or every 3 weeks, say. This is hypothetical.
Yeah.
But if your body could take a lot of fats and is primed and foundationally ready for it, maybe that result actually would be beneficial. But I mean, I'm not a fay on the fat loading principles, so I'm not sure. I'd have to do a bit more looking at that. I'm interested actually to go and have a look at that. But
Yeah, it's something, it spikes the interest, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the person that goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like the standard sort of protocols that I've used across the board with gosh, you know, all of our clients really, bar a couple of people who maybe have intolerances or certain things that you've got to be wary of, it's worked. And it tends to, if you're in shape and your fat levels are, you know, your body fat is at a good
point,
level for stage, that process just sucks you all in and just brings out the magic. I'm yet to find someone that hasn't worked on.
Yeah, it's like you say, don't break it if it doesn't need to be fixed, because I've had the same with peaking. Like I've tried different ways, whether I load carbs higher and then bring them down but still quite high into a peak, or whether I do it the opposite way around. And then when I have tried other ways, I think, why have we tried other ways? Because it's always worked. But it's nice to sometimes, and if you can have a practice within a prep and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, in regards to the flexible dieting and the meal plans, that's something, if you've got a coach, you know, obviously flexible dieting, they're saying hit these macros and calories. If it's a meal plan, it's eat X, Y, and Z throughout a day. And like you say, it could be incorporating the two, but it is so person dependent. There's no real, I mean, I bet you get people that you do one way and then you think actually this person's going to benefit more from the other.
100%. Yeah, and I think there has been a lot of studies done to show that people who follow programs like what you're doing right now, Sarah, you know, that allow a little bit of greater flexibility in food choices tend to actually be more successful for certain clients and certain populations, and certainly more successful at keeping weight off over time. So you get a better retention rate to that style of eating because it gives the client a bit more autonomy. They have to think about what they're eating and make sure it fits within a certain realm. And I think that gives people a little bit of confidence in themselves that, hey, this is good. I've got this process, but actually I can still choose. I can still make choices. And I can still and then it gives people confidence in themselves to continue that. So you're more likely to adhere to it and stick to it over time.
Yeah, because ultimately, like Stephen's always said to me as a coach, he's like, you know, one day if we do part ways, I don't really want to because I just love having a coach. But he's like, you know, if we do part ways one day, I don't want to have held anything back. I want you to be able to live a fruitful life and know that I've given you all the education I can. I remember when I did my first prep flexible dieting, I was just like, I want a meal plan. I want to be really strict. I want to kill myself. You know, I want to be a bodybuilder. And actually him doing the flexible approach was better in the long run. At the time I was like, no, but I turned into this neurotic, you know, person, like I've mentioned before. And actually if I was on a meal plan, he could foresee that it could potentially make my mental health worse.
Absolutely. You've totally hit the nail there, because stricter diets for some people tend to negatively have psychological effects on your well-being, and you tend to
consumed.
Totally, because you lose, and I think there'll be hundreds of bodybuilders who could talk on this topic, but you lose sight of what's normal because you become so like, I'm in this box, I eat these foods at this time doing this protocol, and it's like, when you step out of that, if you've been that rigid for that long, you have to recalibrate and come back to a normal level of understanding, which is this approach here that we're talking about, which is feeling okay that no foods are off limits, that within a balance they're okay, and to not forget that, you know, once upon a time before bodybuilding came along, you ate all these things and you were fine.
go to the cinema and maybe eat a bag of M&Ms, and
Yeah.
it's okay, but and you know nothing bad happened. But you know, certainly when and first timers, I'd imagine a lot of people would relate. You don't want to be able to eat these foods. You want to be told that these foods are bad. You do
Yeah.
not, you do not eat chocolate. You do not eat crisps. And when you're allowed, you know, to do that, it almost feels like, well, I'm not a real bodybuilder then. But now I definitely, over my time as a bodybuilder, I guess the reach across even things like, you know, like cream of rice, all the different flavors you can get now, and you know, all the different proteins, all the different things you can get. People are like, oh, okay, so you can get cherry bakewell flavored cream of rice, you can get protein bars, and they're okay because they're labeled protein and they're sold by companies that are okay in the bodybuilding world. And it's like, they're not that far removed from having a couple of squares of dark chocolate with oats. But you know, it's almost like because they've been labeled, everyone's like, oh, it's okay to incorporate these foods, but it's learning when and where to have these foods within what your goal is.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, like, it's funny because lots of people kind of gravitate towards that, like you say, because it's protein or because it's cream of rice or whatever else. But actually,
cream of rice is mental at the moment.
Oh, don't even get me started. Don't even get me started on the.
I mean, I'm the oats gang. So.
I'm calling it the core trend.
Yeah.
Like, all these cores, you know, like lapping it up.
I'm always like, sorry, but oats for me are life. Like cream of rice, I'm just like, it's £50 for like a massive tub. You can get 150 for Tesco's oats, and they're bloody delicious. And I just can't get into the whole COR gang.
I can't either. And I think the more experience and the more you learn, the more you've been around, the more you start to spot these things and go, that's a total gimmick, right? In my opinion, it's a total gimmick. Because
you do know we might get hunted down for saying this.
Yeah, well, probably will. But here's the deal, though. Like, oatmeal versus cream rice on this point, all right? Like, oats, yeah, they have a good level of fat, good level of fiber, and they're slow release GI, yeah? So they are like really, really good for your digestive tract. They help you process, you know, like they help you.
Regular.
Yeah, make you regular, good fiber intake, etc., and have a much higher content of fiber and fats within the oat bowl than the cream of rice does. Cream of rice is literally cream of rice.
Well, it's like baby food, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's baby food, and it's just majority of it's made out of water. It lacks the nutritional density that oats actually has. So although it's fancy to have cream of rice, like in terms of maybe the flavor or whatever, it lacks the nutritional properties that actually oats do. So
yeah, I mean, it's the first time I was exposed to anything like it was on a peak week. I don't have oats close to the show because of the fiber, etc., and they're slow release. I try and get the quick release carbs, and I tried baby rice from Tesco, just like Aptamel or whatever.
Yeah, which is like the same thing.
Yeah. And that was the first time I had it, and I stirred my protein in like I would my oats, and it was just like, I don't even feel like I'm eating. It's just like liquidy. And then the COR started coming on the scene, and it was like, oh, I think it's the same thing, but it's like if you get it from a website that's a nutrition website, it's like 1,000,000 times the price. But it's the same thing. And I mean, one thing it would serve well, I think, is obviously a peak week. And I think in an off season, if you're, especially males, if your calories are getting quite high, it's really easy to eat.
Volume, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it could lend itself to that. But this is all things that when you do flexible dieting, you can toy around with.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you don't have it again. If you do, then you can experiment flavors or whatever.
If you want to put like stories up of your cream of rice every morning to feel like die-hard bodybuilder, then go for it.
Part of the gang.
It's funny, like I've never been a sheep. It's not one of these things that I am, but I mean the cream of rice thing, I get it from a like fun sort of thing for people to buy into. From having knowledge of nutrition, it makes no sense to me. Like
it's like everything, isn't it? It's like when grenade bars first came out.
Yes,
the whole world went ape shit, and even, you know, people from normal walks of life were having it.
Do you remember Quest bars? Where did they go?
Oh my god, like literally for ages they were my favorite, the chocolate chip cookie dough. Oh
Where
my
the hell
day.
do they go though? Like I
You
was
can
thinking,
get them, but they're not.
yeah, they're just
And
not.
but then the fiber in some of them, like there's 15 grams of fiber in a bar, and you think, oh.
Yeah, that was maybe one of the things I was going to say before, that you can fit these things in, but remember, they taste good for a reason. There's a lot of polyols,
Yeah.
additives,
Yeah.
stuff in these things that will make your guts, if you're not ready for it, go a bit mental. And sometimes you might just be better opting for the slab of dark chocolate, you'll be all right.
Yeah, because like you say with Quest bars as well, like a common confusion with a lot of flexible dieting is it when you scan it in, it gives the net carbs.
Mm.
So, if I didn't know about carbohydrates, you scan them in and sometimes it would come up as like 4 grams of carbs for the bar, and you'd be thinking, yes, get in. But
Yeah.
actually it's like 24, but they put it as net carbs. So that the flexible dieting can be a bit of a mind warp in regards to, if you're scanning it in, if you're checking the packet. But once you have your library of foods, and what I tend to do is I'm pretty much flexible diet, but I'm on a meal plan during the week because I make 5 portions of my chicken and veg, 5
Yeah.
portions of my salmon, and then I have that Monday to Friday. Weekends I have a bit more time, so you can doing the two is also ideal for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think it's sort of figuring it out, like what works for you. If I jump back to like the Zoe diet that I was just talking about before, which, she's currently in her off season, we're getting up to some nice levels of intake, sitting around that 2,283 calorie mark. Her fats are sitting around about 60 grams, just under 60 grams,
which is a nice amount.
Which is a nice amount for a healthy female of her height, her build. Her carbohydrates are nice and high. She's sitting on around about 250 on her high days of carbohydrate, and just sitting around about 180 grams of protein. So she's like, she's got a hefty, good amount of healthy foods in that plan. And she's sitting at 63 kilos, or just under actually, 62 and a bit, and is holding her composition really well. And that's where we need her to be. And not everyone's going to be able to take that amount of food that quickly. She's got a lot of muscle mass on her frame, and she's got a good metabolic rate. But that's a good example there of a breakdown of macros for somebody who is in her off season, a natural competitor, and looking to get her performance nutrition up to standard, so that when she gets in that gym, she's currently doing a deadlift plan, and we're hitting big numbers, she feels strong. That's where we need her to be.
That's such a nice feeling off the back of a prep, when you can really delve into lifting more, because it gives you a focus, because you've been hyper focused on a show. It's like, oh my god, I can lift more. And that gives you a new realm and a new goal. I mean, it'd be, I think, probably a good point for us to say, if people were looking for us to delve into what macronutrients might look like more for things like an off season or a prep, as we always say, it's completely bespoke, and we're not going to list what people should have. But it's definitely worth, if people have got questions for us in regards to meal plans a bit more, flexible dieting a bit more, or how it would look as a female competitor in an off season or a prep, we'd definitely be up for that.
100%. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can approach putting a diet together for people, depending on what is. And I guess as well, the beauty of something like if it fits your macros or your flexible dieting, is also for people who maybe have certain dietary specifications. People who maybe have intolerances to dairy, to wheat, maybe they're vegan, maybe they're vegetarian. It gives more opportunity for those people to see how to balance out a diet. And particularly, this is something actually I've got a few vegan and vegetarian clients. You guys who are vegans and vegetarians tend to find it quite hard to get the protein up to hit the carbohydrate and your fiber and everything else, because these foods that you guys are intaking actually tend to have a lot more carbohydrate in them than protein. So to get the balance right is more difficult, and that's where the education side of things can come in, and the macro splits can be quite useful for them to see, okay, if I'm going to be consistently eating this diet, where do I need to get the bare minimum of my protein from, and go from there. Like
and what foods include those macronutrients. And
yeah,
it'd be really nice to actually base maybe an episode on a couple of listener questions or some feedback, delve into this a lot more. But I think today's episode has been a really good way to like open the floor, as it were.
Sure.
We had our discussion before, didn't we, to say let's try and get people in to give us some suggestions now, because we've hit that point where, you know, we're so open and we've got a lot more reach now.
Yeah.
We'd love you guys listening to
case studies of different things if people want it.
Yeah. So do you think wrap it up there, and then
that's good.
And we share on our, you know, socials, etc., like we do, but we want to just direct it more to getting people involved now, because we've, like we say, we've got that base of people listening every time we do our videos, and we just want everyone involved. We just love it.
Yes. Give us your questions, your topics, anything you want to delve into, and don't be shy. You guys are living, breathing, doing these things, and sometimes I know, because I get messages from people on the WhatsApp, on Instagram, where you're like, oh, do you mind if I ask this? And honestly, if you've got those questions, put them in and let us know, and we'll jump into topic information for you.
Yeah, awesome. So if you want to message me, it's Sarah Parker Hatchard on Instagram's the best, and then Steff, obviously, like you said.
Yeah, Steff_Noble Figure Pro, and Pro Prep Coaching if anyone wants to go check out some of there's quite a lot of nutritional stuff on there. So if anybody wants to go see some posts on nutritional plans, they're on there as well.
Hit us up. And Zoe's Instagram, is it Zoe Cook or?
She is Body Positive on Instagram. So if you guys find Body Positive, she shares tons of great stuff, and she is an excellent cook with foods and gives you ideas on how to kind of mix things up, like making pancakes and eggs and
lots of different things.
God, everything. She's so good. I'm constantly asking her for tips. So yes, go check her out.
Cool. So until next time, everyone, get sharing any questions, anything you want to reach out about. We are here.
We are. Cool. Peace out.
Cool. Thanks, Steff. See you later.
Take care.